in the whole 6010.
Hello and welcome into Fantasy Focus Football. It is Wednesday, September 28th. Today's show is presented by Geico. Switch to Geico, see all the ways that you could save. Daniel, Stephania, and Field hanging out with you today talking rankings. Our good friend Liz Loza is going to stop by the show a little bit later today. We're going to talk with her about some people that have her stumped when she's doing her Week 4 rankings as well. But first and foremost, what? What was that?
I'm stumped. I'm stumped by a lot of things.
There's so many things have me stumped for my rankings this week.
If she can narrow it down to a few, good for her.
For my rankings in life, a lot of things that have me stumped, just in general.
Just in general.
Yeah.
I'm with you on that one. Well, listen, we got a lot of stuff we are going to get to today. We're going to start with some injuries, Stephania Bell. Unfortunately. Well, you know, what do you want me to say?
I know.
Let's start with the New Orleans Saints, where both Michael Thomas and Jarvis Landry, we saw them both leave the game this last week. What are the expectations for them here heading into Week 4 for fantasy managers?
It's really tricky because Saints are in London, right? So the players are already over there, and this
practicing as you and I speak.
Right, and this is one of those weeks where just because the players traveled doesn't necessarily mean they're going to play. And I think we heard initially that both of these people weren't that worried about them, but I think just there's a little more than meets the eye, perhaps. So you just want to keep a close eye on the injury reports. Michael Thomas left the game with a foot injury. Now, it's not the same side as his surgically repaired ankle. That's a bonus, but he didn't return to the game. But it's worth remembering that when he did have his ankle injury, it started out as something that wasn't serious, and he tried to play through it. And then ultimately we got to this point where he needed surgery and missed a lot of time. Not saying that's the scenario, but just sometimes things aren't always as they appear out of the gate. So I would take a wait-and-see approach and see what happens while they're over there in London.
Yeah, just wanted to add to that because they are practicing already this morning, and there are some reporters on the scene, and they have noted that not only is Michael Thomas absent right now, Jameis Winston is also absent from the first day of practice, which means that Andy Dalton presently taking first-team reps for the New Orleans Saints across the pond. And to Stephania's point that, just because you travel doesn't mean you're going to play. The Saints played in Carolina on Sunday. They flew directly from Carolina.
They went right from the game.
They're not going to fly guys back just to pick, you're going to just go and, hey, get yourself some lovely British cuisine along the way. Tea.
Cucumber
sandwiches. Bangers and mash?
Cucumber
sandwiches. I like bangers and mash more.
We finally did that. Thank you for finally having
I did. But to follow up on that, Andy Dalton took extra reps last week because of Jameis Winston dealing with the fractures in his back, dealing with the ankle injury. He's certainly gotten beat up. He's not moving that well. It wouldn't be a surprise if Andy Dalton went and had played, but they may just also be giving Jameis the maximum amount of time here.
Sure, wouldn't surprise me either way. Long flight, just don't do anything for a couple days.
And then Jarvis Landry got his foot. If you saw, he was trying to catch a pass that was behind him, and his foot seemed to catch in the turf a little bit. It looked bad when he left the game. If you were watching this, he kind of needed help off the field. It looked significant. We all know, if you've been following football for a long time, Jarvis Landry is so tough. He does not like to miss games. He'll play through just about anything. If there's a guy who has a chance to play, it's Jarvis Landry. But I would not, again, underestimate either the severity of the injury, and you know the thing about getting on a plane right after? That does not help if you have swelling. I mean, these teams travel with these. They travel with the boots, the compression sleeves. They're putting them on the cold and compression immediately. But still, long flight, travel, all of that complicates recovery from these kind of things in this week. So watch those reports from the reporters who are on site very carefully, because this could come down to the wire for a few of the Saints players.
All right. Another wide receiver that we are monitoring is Amon-Ra St. Brown. Stephania had an ankle injury.
That's for your Detroit Lions.
He does, and he has been one of the rocks within fantasy football, and I need to make sure that he's back here for my Week 4 lineup. So what can we expect for Amon-Ra St. Brown this week?
Here's where I'd be concerned. The early reporting was that he had further tests on Monday, not considered serious. He rolled his ankle early, but if you saw the difference in how he looked between the early part of the game and the later part of the game when he was dealing with the ankle. Yep. Now, great that he stayed in the game. We know adrenaline gets a lot of these guys through, but what happens when all the tape comes off, the ankle swells a little bit, and if he does play, I mean, he says he's good. He says he expects to play. Are we going to get the Amon-Ra of the latter half of the game, not by any fault of his own, but because he's dealing with an injury? That would be my concern.
Can't stress this enough. The Lions are 2 weeks away from their bye week. So if you're the team and you're evaluating, You're extremely talented running back in DeAndre Swift, who you've already sort of said is going to be out for the next 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. You're extremely talented wide receiver in Amon-Ra St. Brown. And this is a close call. Time might not be on his side here to get back on the field. It may be, hey, if we can sit you this week and next, and I don't have any information here. I'm just putting together logical thoughts. That would mean that you would go a month without having to play on that ankle, which I know that you are a competitor and I know that you're the best player on our offense right now. But man, if we can get a month, we're more worried about the rest of your career here. We hope you have a 12-year dynamite career with the Detroit Lions. Might be something to consider. So we'll monitor this one further, but I do think the team has to always be looking out for the player's best interests as well.
Yeah, and another guy that we are looking at, finally available to return everyone's favorite, Zach Wilson, Stephania. Is he going to be back here this week? Maybe everyone's favorite or maybe going to return?
Maybe both.
Okay,
all
right.
We'll see. I mean, look, Joe Flacco's been throwing the ball.
He
He's
has
been a
been pretty good.
fantasy-friendly quarterback. You can't complain about that. But Zach Wilson coming off the sprain that he had in that knee and the subsequent arthroscopic surgery that he had. Remember when it was that he was going to be back like in no time, and all of a sudden the Jets retreated a little bit and said, no, we're going to do what's best for the player. I think that remains the case, but by all accounts, he's doing well. We'll have to see if he picks it up in practice this week.
Yeah, we'll see. There's been sort of like, it's been stated like that's their goal, but it's also been stated the goal is not a certainty. I'm not saying this is going to drive the decision, but I will tell you, I'm a little worried given the fact that the Jets' top 3 offensive tackles not currently available for the team, as Dwayne Brown on IR. As we know,
Mekhi Becton
out for the season. And as of yesterday, George Fant also on IR. Like, this is a team that made 3 legit investments in an offensive tackle. All 3 of them no longer available. That's a little bit scary for a team that has a young quarterback coming off of a knee injury.
Coming off a knee injury. Still very novice in the position. Do you really want to put him back out there, especially when Joe
against
Flacco's
the Steelers, by the way?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, no big deal. No big deal.
I know TJ Watt's not available, but still. Cam Hayward, dog.
Yeah.
Right. I don't know that that's where I'd want to be introducing him back into the lineup. We'll see.
We'll see how that works out. All right, let's move ahead and talk about some Week 4 rankings, some guys that gave us a few fits or guys that we really enjoyed ranking that we just noticed stood out to us from that standpoint. I'm going to start. I hope you guys don't mind this, but
go for it.
Yesterday, I threw this out there last week. Yesterday, I did 6 p.m. Sports Center again.
Yeah. Oh,
NBD.
Yeah.
And I said to Elle Duncan, I was like, I've been waiting my entire adult life to be able to say this on television. Because of the Detroit Lions' explosive offense, Jamal Williams is my preferred running back waiver target this week. And when I look at Jamal Williams, Field, you just mentioned DeAndre Swift may miss some time, right? Even if he doesn't miss time, do you know where Jamal Williams is right now as far as running backs on the season? We've talked about how bad running backs are in fantasy.
You know what the answer is, Daniel? He's a lot higher than I'm comfortable with. He is
RB6? Running back 8.
The
Detroit Lions have 2 top 10 fantasy running backs in this season that we're talking about how bad running backs are. How do you like that?
You're allowed to have a moment. You're allowed to have a moment.
And
I will say this.
Swift.
I will say this. You were on the Jamal Williams as a standalone running back in our preseason conversation. I remember that because we were a little concerned about how much value he would hold as a standalone running back. And you were... So far, you're looking pretty smart.
So far, the way that I look at this, right? I love DeAndre Swift. Everyone loves DeAndre Swift, but Jamal Williams has been the guy at the goal line. Now, from this standpoint, if DeAndre Swift misses any time, I don't expect...
I think he will.
And we expect that. I don't expect Jamal Williams to just come in and be DeAndre Swift, from that standpoint. He's not going to look like DeAndre Swift. They're different running backs. But he is a legit set it and forget it starting running back in this Lions offense that is using the running backs more than almost any other team in the league right now. I freaking love Jamal Williams. I have him at running back 13 this week. Fields, you have him at 13. Liz has him at 11. And they're taking on the Seattle Seahawks. I'm in on Jamal Williams, not just for this week, but potentially for the next couple of weeks because of that DeAndre Swift injury.
Yep, until he returns, there are a few NFC North running backs that are backups that until their starters are back on the field, they'll be lineup locks this week.
Yeah, you're right. All right, let's talk about Dameon Pierce next.
I love me some Dameon Pierce. Maybe you remember that from the preseason. That was my biggest takeaway from Texans camp. And then it was like, pump the brakes. Rex Burkhead's still there. Guess who's overtaken Rex Burkhead? Is
Logic.
Top rusher. Right.
Yeah. Yes, Logic.
Logic has taken over. That's correct. Yeah.
Well, we weren't sure after week 1, I mean, everything was like, hey, Rex Burkhead's still there. And I was like, yeah, I know he's still there, but not for long. They wanted to be confident. So increased touches for Dameon Pierce this week, nearly 50% of his yards after contact, which I think is going to match up well against an ailing Chargers this week. 20 carries, 80 yards, and a touchdown this past week, and then 2 catches. He's still, Rex Burkhead, when it's like passing downs, like you're still going to see him. He's still got some value there, but the volume at running back going to Dameon Pierce, he looks the part. And by the way, I looked ahead at their matchups, okay? So they have Jacksonville after this week, Jacksonville, then a bye. Then the Raiders and the Titans. He's going to do well there, I think. Yep. Then the Eagles. Okay, a little tougher. Then the Giants and the Commanders. Dameon Pierce is good.
He is good, yeah. And, the big thing here, the big thing for Dameon Pierce that unlocks it all is, well, there are 2 things. And we said this during the preseason, and it's consistent now, is if they stay tough, and they have stayed tough through their 3 games, right? They've played competitive in each of these 3 games so far, even though they're 0-2-1. He's going to be able to stay on the field. Or he's going to blossom into a more voluminous pass catcher because he had just 2 catches for 13 yards in week 3. If we see that number increase, then we're talking about a lineup lock. Yep. Now he's close to it, but if he gets more passing game usage, which that's still an area of strength for Rex Burkhead, but if Pierce just takes that duty over, then we're talking about a potential top 15 running back.
This is a rookie, and we're at the 3rd week, and we're already seeing this shift. So I think nowhere to go but up for him.
All right.
So normally we wouldn't have a conversation about Tom Brady, but it's 2022.
Yeah.
And over the past couple of weeks, I and many people, I think, have urged against starting Tom Brady, right? The matchups were very difficult over the past 2 weeks. The Saints, who have always played Tom Brady tough. And then last week, we all know that the Packers are a very good defense, plus that there was no Chris Godwin, there was no Mike Evans because of suspension, and we didn't know if Julio Jones would be available. It turned out that he was not available. Well, it's possible, and we're having this conversation on Wednesday at 10:16 a.m. on the East Coast, that Mike Evans will be available. That much is for sure. Chris Godwin could be available. Julio Jones could be available. Russell Gage should be available. A guy who had 12 catches last week, by the way.
Why make it easy on us, Field? You know what I mean?
Yeah, but yeah, that's right. But I would say that all of a sudden Tom Brady, I think, is back into starting territory for this week. They play the Chiefs on Sunday night. Chiefs defense did play better against the Colts last week, but Chiefs defense also allowed 334 passing yards to the one great quarterback they've seen so far this season. That's Justin Herbert. If there are Cardinals fans that are disappointed, your team played terrible in week 1. And I think that Kyler Murray, very well paid and a very good player, he's on the same level, in my opinion, as a passer as Justin Herbert is, right? And their weapons are not as good as the Chargers' weapons are, in my opinion, as well, especially with no DeAndre Hopkins right now. So the toughest test that the Chiefs have faced so far this year was Herbert. It was a fairly good night for Justin Herbert on the whole. That included playing the 4th quarter with a shattered rib cage, basically. So I'm back in on Tom Brady as a starter this week. Now, where I need to alter my expectations from the beginning of the season was the idea that he could be in that top echelon of quarterbacks. I don't know if that's going to be there because of the rate at which the Bucs are running the football so far this season. That seems to be a bit of an identity shift. But for this week, and I know it sounds crazy that I'm having to make the case for Tom Brady as a starter, I've got him back inside my top 10. I have him as quarterback 8. I expect, and this is contingent upon having Chris Godwin and Julio Jones available on Sunday night, at least one of them. Then I feel good about Tom Brady being back in your starting lineup this week.
Boy.
Yeah, I'm not confident we see Chris Godwin, but I am confident we see Julio.
All right, so then let's actually just skip ahead and talk about Julio. Field, do you mind doing that? Because understanding,
I don't think that was me.
About Julio? Well, then Stephania, why don't you talk about Julio?
I've been a Julio apologist since I've
I know that's one of the only disruptions in our friendship. Don't worry.
But I have so much respect for him. And number one, who does Tom Brady love more than a trusted wide receiver, veteran player? Julio had a good week 1 until he banged up his knee. He had 3 targets, 69 yards. Gave you more than 10 fantasy points. So for all the naysayers out there, now he didn't play week 2 or week 3, but Todd Bowles later said that he could have gone in week 4. They were just being cautious. So they're already telling you he's going to play this week. That's the expectation. Mike Evans is back, which actually helps with Julio Jones on the opposite side. I don't think Chris Godwin's going to be, he hasn't practiced yet. And coming off the ACL with a hamstring injury, Maybe he does dip his toe back in, but I would expect they're going to be conservative even if he does come back. So to me, Julio Jones is the one to look at. I don't think he's ranked, guys.
I don't think he is.
He's not. I think that
And
Mike's projections probably include a couple things. A, Chris Godwin, and B, the possibility that Julio Jones is playing a slightly part-time role when he comes back this Sunday.
Yeah, or maybe that he didn't think that he was really going to be back. And I think that this could shift as the week moves on.
I was going to say, as the week moves on, too, our rankings always are fluid. And so as we get more information, if Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, that definitely is going to impact
I'm looking
Julio.
for a receiver flex play. I think Julio's a good option.
Okay. All right. I like it this week. Taking on the Chiefs on Sunday night.
By the way, there's a lot of disruption
Sunday
for
night.
this team, right? Because of the hurricane situation, very serious. We want everybody to be safe in the Tampa area, but they are moving. They're shifting their operations for practice this week to Miami. Again, somebody like Tom Brady, I don't think he gets rattled by anything, but that to me is where a lot of the veterans come into play. So the guys who are going to practice all week, play, and not be really impacted by things move around, that's another bonus for Julio.
Sure. All right. You want to talk about Sunday night? I want to talk about Monday night because this one was really tough for me. And I want to know if it was just me, Field Yates, because Tyler Higbee and his volume for the Los Angeles Rams have been absolutely fantastic. He has more catches than any other Ram not named Cooper Kupp has targets. He has more catches than targets than anyone else on that Rams offense not named Cooper Kupp. Yeah. He is the number 2 pass catcher there. But the San Francisco 49ers.
All the Allen Robinson managers can tell you that is
seriously
exactly the case.
But the San Francisco 49ers have given up 7 points to tight ends through 3 games so far this year.
All right. So here's the peril of going through tight end stats.
You got to go through the game logs and look at everything.
Week 1.
You took on the Chicago Bears and Cole Kmet from that standpoint, which is really tough.
Yeah. All right. So Monsoon, can't do that.
Yep.
Okay. Basically, that's a null and void game, in my opinion.
Week 2.
Seahawks.
And what are you going to do with Noah Fant and Geno Smith? He threw for less than 200 yards in that game.
Not to mention they have like 4 tight ends. They have Colby Parkinson and Will Dissly and Noah Fant. Not exactly facing off against, George Kittle or Mark Andrews here. And then week 3, the Broncos, who Albert O was a thing for like 5 minutes, but not really a thing. So I tread lightly on tight end stats for that exact reason.
So this is, all I'm saying to that point, is this is the first real test for Tyler Higbee as the number 2 pass catcher right now within this Rams offense going up against what's going to be the best defense that the Rams have played against, especially for his position. And I still have him as a starter, but I am nervous heading into this week where the last couple weeks I have not been the same kind of nervous at the tight end position with Tyler Higbee just because of the San Francisco 49ers defense. Still a top 10 play, still a guy that I am starting. I'm not worried about from that standpoint, but maybe lowering my expectations a little bit because that defense is legit.
Well, I think what's hard is tight end is like a wasteland, right? I mean, there's Mark Andrews, there's Travis Kelce, and
that's it.
That's about it.
Seriously, through 3 weeks.
Through 3 weeks, there's no consistency. George Kittle, love you, but it wasn't available the first 2 weeks. And I think George Kittle is going to be called on to block more. You saw anything in that Denver game. So, Kyle Pitts, we're still finding out where Kyle Pitts lives because this is not
the end zone.
Pretty.
Not the end zone. That's all I can tell you.
So who can you rely on? And I understand from that standpoint, Tyler Higbee looks attractive because he's certainly a target.
Volume is huge, but he gets one of the toughest defenses against tight ends.
His inconsistency wins the day at tight end.
Yep, I'm with you there. So the players that I want to talk about next, these are a 2-for-1 special, is Michael Carter / Breece Hall, because we're seeing perhaps a changing of the guard for the Jets. This is the first week that we have Michael Carter in terms of our consensus ranks behind Breece Hall. I think there have been individual rankers who maybe add Hall ahead of Carter on a one-time basis, but consensus rank right now is Breece Hall at 27, Michael Carter at 29. So we all expected that at some point Breece Hall was going to take over as the guy in the Jets backfield. It's not yet at that stage, right? It's not like we have Breece Hall at 17 and Carter at 37. 27 and 29 still shows you that they're valued comparably, but that we saw more Breece Hall last week in terms of snap percentage. He had a fumble early on in his season, week 1, where you're kind of like, can't do that. But he also had 10 targets, been involved in the passing game. I expect him to be involved in the running game more. This is a talent hedge, right? That Breece Hall is going to get there talent-wise, and I think there's a possibility that that gap continues to widen as soon as this week. This is a game against the Steelers where they should be able to run it a bunch. Joe Flacco's been throwing the ball 9,000 times so far this year. The Steelers ain't exactly an offensive juggernaut. So if there's a game in which the Jets can play the script of trying to ground and pound, even with the compromised offensive line, this is it. I have a feeling that Breece Hall has his best day as a runner, maybe by far so far this season.
Do you think that they're really going to shift to, like we talked about with the Texans, like it's going to be Dameon Pierce way up in terms of volume?
Yeah.
Or are the Jets going to stick with sort of this middle of the road, or is it going to look like Denver?
I think it might end up being a little bit more of a Breece Hall thing. Here's the reason why, Stephania. They're a miracle away from being 0-3.
Yeah.
I mean, they look dreadful this past week, right? And ultimately, what's the best way to get on track is your talent, right? And Breece Hall, Mike Carter's good. He's a good player, no doubt, right? But Breece Hall has the chance to be a really good runner in this league. So I think by midway or maybe even 2/3 of the way through the season, we'll see more of Breece Hall by a lot than Michael Carter. Maybe it's more like 60-40 at some point. For now, it might be more like 52-48, but for the first 2 weeks of the season, it felt like 55-45 in Carter's favor. So we're starting to even things out a little bit and maybe even tilting towards Breece Hall, which is where I'm at for week 4.
Yeah. I want to talk about a running back too, and Tony Pollard going from the Jets to the Cowboys, because I have Tony Pollard ranked at 24 this week ahead of Ezekiel Elliott.
Okay.
And when I watched Tony Pollard, running back 10 over the last 2 weeks, he looks like the offense is utilizing him differently than the way the Cowboys are utilizing Ezekiel Elliott. When I watch Zeke run, Zeke is running up the middle.
Yep.
Zeke is grabbing big 5-yard chunks at a time, right? Like that's part of what he does. Well, yeah, I think he has almost 60% of his rushes go for at least 5 yards. From that standpoint, he is not catching the football. He has 3 catches for -5 yards. He has more catches than me, but I have more receiving yards than he does on the season. Okay,
yeah, you do. Yeah.
For the record, Ezekiel Elliott has turned into this like Nick Chubb inefficient light version of Nick Chubb, where he's a runner.
Inefficient.
He is not a pass catcher, and he's become a touchdown dependent running back within this Cowboys offense, where Tony Pollard, almost 20% of Tony Pollard's plays are going for over 10 yards. The explosiveness that you see from him, as well as that pass catching.
If he gets out to the edge, that's where Tony Pollard's really dangerous.
And you see that. You're able to see that. So for me, I'm taking this week, finally in week 4, I'm taking the stance. I'm going with Tony Pollard over Ezekiel Elliott based on what I've seen and the way that the Dallas Cowboys are utilizing these two guys differently.
Yeah, I have it flipped. I still have Zeke ahead of Tony Pollard.
Why are you wrong, Field?
Well, Tony Pollard, how many catches did he have last week?
Not a ton.
He had 0. 0. So the pathway for Tony Pollard to take over Zeke is to have a consistent passing game role. And last week we didn't see that. I don't know what the reason is for that, whether it's because the playbook shifts with Cooper Rush as opposed to Dak Prescott, whether it's because he's taken on more responsibility as a runner, whether it was just a fluke. But Zeke is still the much better bet to get the goal line carries.
And we saw why. I mean,
and
Siri wants to tell me something. Sorry.
I think has a chance to lead the team every week in carries as well. There's no two. I mean, I've talked about this recently. I mean, they're playing a different sport athletically, Zeke versus Tony Pollard. But Zeke still seems to be the guy that if they have a 1st and goal because CeeDee Lamb get tackled at the 2-yard line,
which I was super psyched about.
Zeke is going to get the first crack at that opportunity, I guess. So that's why I have it. That's why I have it ranked the way that I do. I still have Zeke as like a strong flex play and Tony Pollard as a less strong flex play. But you're making the right points, Daniel. I mean, Tony Pollard's way more explosive, but this team is, maybe to our chagrin, committed to Zeke Elliott.
Well, I also think it's going to be interesting to see if they stay committed to the run game at all, because when Dak comes back, which could be fairly soon, so I don't think he'll be back this week. He just got the stitches out. Not get overexcited. But I think that what we saw was Dallas looks like a more balanced, better functioning offense when they have a run game that balances out the passing game. And that they went away from that last year. And it put a lot of pressure on Dak, and the run game was sort of a hot mess. And because if you go back to the very beginning of last season, Zeke was running well. That was before the injury. It was before they kind of shifted the play calling. I thought this Monday night did a lot for them. In a lot of ways in terms of reinforcing how they can go about winning games. And, obviously they have some issues up front. Obviously their defense is fantastic. But if their defense plays the way they expect them to against Washington, you might see a lot of the running game.
Yep, I'd agree with that. The defense is the strength of the team right now. They are awesome. They are incredible up front,
so
especially.
Fun to watch.
I mean, Micah Parsons, one-man ranking crew.
No kidding.
All right, let's talk about Brandin Cooks
Yeah, I'm going all in on the Texans against the Chargers. I just, we were panicking
You watched the
about
Jaguars game and you were like, this is what it's all about.
Yes, and also I just think there's a lot to overcome for the Chargers. It is really tough. So Joey Bosa's out for a long period of time. Their linebacker, who's phenomenal. Also, their top corner is out. In Jackson. Now, he's got ankle inflammation. He tried to play, but he's had ankle inflammation issues. I don't see him playing this week. Brandin Cooks, we haven't seen any touchdowns, and so that has really hurt you in fantasy. But 29 targets over the first 3 weeks. He's still the guy that Davis Mills is going to look for.
Yeah.
He had over 1,000 yards receiving last year. Like, if you're wondering if he can get it done with Davis Mills, he can. We've seen it before. I think Brandin Cooks has a get-right game this week.
30% target share this season.
Better days
massive,
ahead.
massive. I'm still confident in Brandin Cooks.
Yeah. Better days ahead with you. I think we're all on the same page.
I think it starts this week.
Yep.
That's
I like
my
that.
call.
All right, Field. Dalvin Cook, Alexander Madison. That's Stephania as well.
Yeah, well, because we got an injury situation here with
I thought it
Dalvin
was because
Cook.
of London. You just wanted to do the whole travel.
I wanted
bangers and mash.
That's what
I just like to say Alexander Madison. Dalvin Cook had this shoulder subluxation. We talked about it. We talked about the fact he's had this injury before and that he's played in a harness. I think the thing is they're calling him day to day. I think Dalvin Cook will be back. He did miss week 13 last year, I think was the same thing. But when he came back, he was phenomenal. I think you get a heavier dose of Alexander Madison this week because no matter what, the first game back from just having a shoulder episode, I lean towards Alexander Madison. But I would not be giving up on Dalvin Cook. I just think this is a situation to watch because we know Alexander Madison is a replacement back, and it's so rare that we say that. If Dalvin Cook is out for any reason, Alexander Madison 100% gets the same kind of role. So for me, if I had Dalvin Cook on my roster, I'm desperately trying to find a way to trade for Alexander Madison.
Yeah.
Because I feel like, honestly, it doesn't matter who's playing.
You know what's crazy is not only does Alexander Madison often look exactly like Dalvin Cook fantasy production wise.
They look like each other when they're on the field. Is that what you were going to say?
They are literally twins on the field. Now that they've changed numbers because they can both wear single digits now.
It's so
Madison's
true.
2, Cook is 4. They used to be 25 and 33. I swear to you, every time I'm watching the Vikings and I'm like, yes, Dalvin Cook at the ball.
And I'm like,
oh, that's Dalvin.
I know, it's so
Yeah.
true. I thought I was alone. I'm like,
No.
You made me
As
feel
far
better.
as
I was
as far
struggling to
as
figure out who was who.
doppelgangers go, those two might be the closest thing to identical twins. I guess Jason McCourty's now a TV star and a great one at that. So I don't think we have any
They're
identical twins.
we got to come up with a name for it, like some
football
kind of
identical
brothers.
twins.
Like,
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, the same number, same style, the way they lean in their stance, they've got the same hairstyle for the most part. Like it is just they're indistinguishable on the field, and for your fantasy lineups, close to it as well, which is good.
Yeah, there's a million things Alexander Madison has yet to do, but just you wait.
His name is.
Just you wait. All right, let's
Just
talk about
you
someone
wait.
else in that London game.
Yeah, Chris Olave, who I absolutely love as a player, was so enthused by his
this
week 3
week.
performance. He was great. 9 catches, 147 yards. And Stephania referenced earlier that Michael Thomas, he's not currently practicing for the Saints. It sounds like Jarvis Landry is at best iffy for the game on Sunday against the Minnesota Vikings as well. Jameis Winston's a question mark. I'll be honest with you. If Jameis Winston is out, that actually, I think, decreases the value of Chris Olave a little bit. Not that Andy Dalton's a bad backup. He's a very serviceable backup, but Jameis Winston just loves to throw the football down the field. And Chris Olave leads the NFL in air yards by 164. 164 more air yards than any other player in the
by
NFL.
164.
Absurd. And he's obviously a great sprinter. I mean, the guy had one of the fastest 40 times at the combine. The unofficial one was even faster than was much faster than the official, but still, the guy can absolutely blaze. He's a great player. It looks like already the Saints paid a huge premium to acquire Chris Olave, and you might have to have, we'll see about whether I'm trading multiple picks, but still, but he looks really good. There's a reason why they wanted this player. Love to see it. There's a chance he is the wide receiver 1 for them this week, and with the health concerns surrounding Michael Thomas, who knows? Like, it could be that Chris Olave winds up being the most valuable Saints wide receiver this year.
I wonder if Alvin Kamara gets some more.
I was wondering
passing
that
work
too.
and,
If
you know,
those two
just-
guys are gonna be out.
I'm starting to
been so
wonder if it's just a
weird.
different world without Drew Brees and that offense. They just don't see the same sort of offensive complexion as they did for all those years of Drew Brees, and that makes me nervous, of course, but it might mean more Chris Olave. So 26 on my board for wide receivers this week. He's close to a lineup block.
Okay, now that that's done, do you know why the Saints don't want Alvin Kamara to be elite? Field, like what is it about this? Like why not put the ball in his hands from a pass catching perspective? That's what makes him elite.
Daniel, I don't know the answer.
It's not just as a fantasy perspective. He's incredible.
No. I mean,
he's actually a good football player.
He's really good with the football in his hands.
This is my only thought, and this is like I'd have to think about this a whole lot more. But my initial thought is, for many years, not only do they have Drew Brees, who was so good in the short area passing game, and he was good down the field too at his apex, but so much precision, so much touch. They had such a great scheme with those screen passes so frequently. Mm-hmm. But also, like, the formula's changed a bit. The Saints right now are going to just knock the snot out of you on defense, and their ideal win might be a grinded out 23-17 game as opposed to a 45-42 effort, which for many years was kind of the way that they rolled. So I don't know, Daniel. I don't have a perfect answer for it. It's frustrating, no doubt. If you roster Alvin Kamara, you probably have to keep on playing him, but it's a little bit scary. If he goes a dud again, then I'm not sure what your runway away from Alvin Kamara is, other than you have to just keep on playing him. You can't trade him. You're trading the guy at the crater value, which that's unfortunate.
It's also tough to be able to think that you have Jameis Winston as your quarterback and your game plan is to grind it out. It just feels like that doesn't always make sense. All right, let's talk about another wide receiver.
A couple more here. Yeah, DJ Moore, Daniel, and I would think there's a category of players that based off name value alone, you think you want to start them. And DJ Moore is an incredible player. I've said this a million times. I just love watching DJ Moore play. I also like it when his team actually enjoys him playing as well. And here's the problem for DJ Moore. He's got 88 receiving yards through 3 games. He is a player that needs to earn his way back into your lineup. I have him as wide receiver 36 this week. I might be too optimistic. The reason why you keep him at 36 as opposed to throwing him at like 56 is that he's still DJ Moore, right? And if the Panthers change their way this week and give him 8 or 10 targets, of course he could have 100+ receiving yards. But I believe he needs to be a bench stash for this week and earn his way back into your lineup. And when I say earn it, I don't mean him. I mean the Panthers. The Panthers have 2 things working against them. They are extremely low volume and extremely inefficient as a passing offense right now. I don't know why they have utilized him so infrequently, but I tried to manifest some Kyle Pitts goodness last week. For the rest of the season, I would love some more of DJ Moore because he felt like a safe play, right? Coming into the season, he had back-to-back-to-back seasons with 1,200+ scrimmage yards. He had exactly 4 receiving touchdowns. So the idea was, hey, he may not have 10 touchdowns this year, but you know you're going to get yards from DJ Moore. Now we're not getting them. I hope that changes soon.
Wow.
Yeah, it's ugly. Like I don't.
You can't start him right now. You can't. I mean, you can't
trade him.
It's a waste.
You can't start him.
You can't trade. You can't.
Waste of a
I would
talent.
not be trading away DJ Moore right now. I would not be starting him right now. I would be crossing your fingers on Saturday night, hoping that Baker wakes up feeling dangerous on Sunday morning, and we can get 10 targets for DJ Moore.
Yep. All right, let's talk about Gabe Davis taking on the Baltimore Ravens. Do you know that Baltimore has allowed a league-high 168 points to wide receivers this season?
Wow.
Did you know that the Buffalo Bills are probably real frustrated with their loss to the Miami Dolphins after last week where they ran 90 plays and scored what, like 17 points? What did they score?
The final score was
14 points?
17.
Yeah,
I think it was 21-17.
something like that.
Yeah.
How do you run 90
17.
plays and you have that kind of an offensive performance and then you take on the Baltimore Ravens who've given up so many points in the passing game
great
this
play
week?
here this week. Great play here this week.
This is a spot where I love Gabe Davis.
Plus one more week removed from his little ankle injury.
Yep. And we saw last week, he was on the field a ton.
91 snaps.
63 routes
Played
run
more than
last
I thought.
87 snaps, excuse me. So, I think that ankle is not a concern for me given how much he was on the field last week. Yeah.
Yep.
And this week with the, I don't want to say it's a revenge. It's just the idea that like they played so poorly last game. They're going to want to come
It's
out.
sort of the
and,
pride thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
They're going to want to come out and show things. And this game's over under is huge.
One pride. Oh, wait. That's not.
Oh, hey, Stephania. I love Gabe Davis, though, in this week just because of the high scoring matchups that could be here. Thinks he's an easy start for me. I have him at wide receiver 24 heading into week 4.
Should we rip through a couple more here
All
to
right,
wrap things
let's
up?
go 3 more. Dalton Schultz. Who's got Dalton Schultz?
Me. I say keep an eye on Dalton Schultz because we mentioned before it's a tight end wasteland. Now, he didn't play this past week because of the sprained PCL he suffered the prior week. I think people thought it went down to the game time and the warm-ups. I had a feeling he probably wasn't going to go. It's a tough injury to come back from just 1 week removed.
Yeah.
But it's also the kind of injury that you can start to play through now. you might remember another Cowboy who had a PCL injury last year, and it was a big, sharp drop-off. I don't necessarily think that Dalton Schultz is going to look exactly like himself out of the gate, but guess who they play? Washington. Yeah. And I think if you're looking for a tight end and he's playing, you know they're going to target the tight end in this offense. They did it even when Schultz was out for Monday night. So if Dalton Schultz is back, I think he is a decent option at tight end for you if you are looking for somebody.
And if he's not back and you're looking at the waiver wire, I don't think this player is available, but what a pleasant surprise Tyler Conklin's been so far for the Jets. The Jets signed 2 tight ends this offseason to near identical contracts, $8 million a year for both Tyler Conklin and CJ Uzomah. Now Uzomah's been hurt, but Conklin's been the way more productive player so far. Target share is hard to ignore. He's got 4 catches in each week so far this season. Here's a fun fact. There are just 4 tight ends who have 4 catches in every game. You can probably guess 2 of them, Mark Andrews and Travis Kelce, plus Tyler Higbee, we talked about earlier, and also Tyler Conklin. So he's creeping into that lineup lock territory. There have been some very disappointing tight ends. He's been one of the few bright spots.
Tyler Conklin is available in 75% of leagues after waivers ran.
Go grab him right now if you can. Yeah, I've got him as a borderline top 10 tight end this week. And he probably deserves to be in that top 10
Probably
range.
deserves to be, yeah. All right, I got one more player I want to talk about, and it might seem confusing, but it's Darnell Mooney. And you're saying, why do you want to talk about Darnell Mooney?
Yeah,
why do you want to talk about
Players have been awful because he's still rostered in 83% of leagues.
That's okay. I understand
That's why
that.
I want to talk about it.
Yeah. Okay.
If you've started...
therapy session.
You drafted... Listen, I talked about Gabe Davis earlier, right? Gabe Davis was drafted as wide receiver 26 this year. Darnell Mooney was drafted as wide receiver 27. He's wide receiver 115 on the year.
Yeah, it's brutal.
Okay? So you drafted him, not just to be a flex player or someone that was going to maybe come off your bench. You drafted him as a starter for your fantasy lineup, and he has not given you that. If you have started 0-3 to start the season, there are a handful of guys off of the waiver wire that I would rather have. Joshua Palmer, I'd rather have. Romeo Dobbs, I'd rather have. Zay Jones, I would rather have. Isaiah McKenzie and Greg Dortch even, I might rather have than Darnell Mooney, because if you started 0-3, you do not have the luxury to just sit there with your underperforming players. You got to make a move. So I'm not saying you need to go out and drop Darnell Mooney, but he is absolutely, totally okay to ditch for me if you need to find someone else.
Fantasy points.
8 fantasy points. 8 fantasy points is what the projection is.
Yeah, it's a bummer.
No.
I don't have a reason. I don't. It's tough. They're just not throwing the football at all right now. And part of the reason is they're playing competitive football now. They're in the portion of their schedule where they can afford to do that. Right? They've played the Texans. They played the monsoon game. And they played the Packers, who Packers are really good, but the Packers, I don't think, are going to win a whole bunch of games 35-32 this year, right? They're going to win a lot of games like they did last week, 14-12. So they've been able to afford to not throw the football that much. They put the Giants this week, so it may not be a much better week for Darnell Mooney.
I feel like that's so weird, though, because you're starting running back and David Montgomery gets hurt. So what are we going to do? We're going to rely on a backup that doesn't even normally
he's good.
He looked pretty good.
He did.
Of course he looked good.
Yeah, but he looked pretty good. Like if I'm going with what they've done so far, I think it's a lot of Khalil Herbert this week.
Yeah, I'm 100% agreement there. Like, yeah, I do think that's exactly what, if you told me like, hey, they're going to rely upon their backup running back, exactly. Because you know why? Every team has good backup running backs.
So if they're going to rely on their backup running back when their star goes out, why on earth am I rostering Darnell Mooney when they had 28 passes through the first 2 games and didn't even throw for 100 yards in week 3?
It's a fair point.
It's a question, right? Again, I think it's just, do you believe that a guy who had over 1,000 receiving yards can revert back to form?
Don't think it's about him. I don't think it's about Darnell Mooney.
Yeah, but it's the same quarterback, right? A lot of the same offensive pieces in some ways, right? Cole Kmet, David Montgomery. It's
Isn't
Justin
it weird
Fields.
how people were like, hey, Allen Robinson's not doing anything there. Darnell Mooney's the number 1. And then you take Allen Robinson away. And this happens. Like, this happens.
It's just tough. That's all I'm saying.
It's tough.
That's where
I'm at. If you need the spot, he is droppable. I also think that if you have a flexible bench spot and Darnell Mooney is dropped, I think there are worse ways to use a last roster spot than having Darnell Mooney stashed on your bench.
If I'm a 3-0 team, I think the upside for Darnell Mooney is great. I would love to have him there.
Long season, people.
Agreed. All right, we're going to talk about panic levels here in a second, but first, Stephania and I are going to pay some bills.
Yeah, we are. Geico asks, how would you love a chance to save some money on insurance? Of course you would. And when it comes to great rates on insurance, Geico can help. Like with insurance for your car, truck, motorcycle, boat, and RV. Even help with homeowners or renters coverage. Plus, add an easy-to-use mobile app, available 24-hour roadside assistance and more, and Geico is an easy choice. Switch today and see all the ways you could save. It's easy. Simply go to geico.com or contact your local agent today.
The NFL action is in full swing here at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. We're talking touchdowns, big plays, and even bigger wins. New customers can bet just $5 on any NFL team to get a win and get $200 in free bets if they do. And if that's not enough, as if it's not, but if that's not enough, everyone can boost their winnings with DraftKings stepped up same game parlays. Right now, for every leg that you add, you can boost your winnings up to 100% with payouts bigger than ever. Why bet on football anywhere else? Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use the promo code FFF to get $200 in free bets. And if your team wins when you place a $5 bet on any football game, then you use code FFF only at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Minimum age and eligibility restrictions apply. 21 plus in most eligible states, but age varies by jurisdiction. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. In Tennessee, call or text the Tennessee Red Line at 1-800-889-9789. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 46739. Bonus issued as free bets. One early win token issued at opt-in. Money line bets only. Deposit and wagering restrictions apply. Eligibility and terms at DraftKings.com/football terms. All right, and now it is time for Panic Levels, brought to you by Geico. Switch to Geico and see all the ways that you could save. And guys, let's talk about who it is that we are most and least panicked about through 3 weeks of the season. There's enough of a small sample size here that we can start to get a little bit under our feet and feel that way. And I'm going to look at this list, right? We got a list of players here that we're going to talk about.
Okay.
We got the Chargers, everything that's going on with
basically all the Chargers. Yeah.
The entire
all of the Chargers.
Yeah.
We got Russell Wilson, obviously, has been tough. Joe Mixon, DK Metcalf, Brandin Cooks, Kyle Pitts, and then a few other players, Justin Jefferson, Jonathan Taylor, and Tom Brady. Least panicked to most panicked.
Okay, so we'll start with the least panic is what you're saying on this group, right?
Yeah.
That's correct.
And we're not taking everybody. Some
Not
of the people on
everyone
that
on that
list,
list.
like Jonathan Taylor.
I think Jonathan
like,
Taylor,
be fine.
Justin Jefferson,
Yeah,
Tom
yeah.
Brady, we're going to leave those guys off the list for now. We're going to say that we're
Makes
okay
sense.
with them.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
being the gentleman that we are, well, let's define you go first. Least panicked.
Well, I would say it's least panic.
Least
Yes.
panic, yes.
Not most panic.
Yes, least panic, yeah.
I'm going to go with Joe Mixon.
Yeah, I like that call.
Because he's
Fair.
getting the work. He's getting the touches. We talk about opportunity. The volume is there. A little concerned about zero in the passing game, really, for him. Maybe that will change. But I'm not worried about Joe Mixon. He's going to put up points every week.
He did have a big week one in terms of the passing game. The biggest concern right now is where we've been for like many years in a row now is that his yards per carry in the first 3 games, 3.0, 3.0, 2.0. I thought the Bengals fixed their offensive line. I thought wrong.
It's still a work in progress.
Still a work in progress. All right. Next player on this list, Field, I'm going to say Kyle Pitts here.
Okay,
because
tell me
I
more.
think Kyle Pitts, regardless of what we've seen through the first 2 weeks, we obviously saw in week 3, they started trying to get him more involved. And with what you drafted Kyle Pitts at, you're not going to bail on Kyle Pitts. He's too good. He's still too young. I got no problems with Kyle Pitts. Yes, it's been tough, but I'm hanging tight.
Okay, yeah.
And also trended up a little bit last week. Like it felt like they discovered him. Like they
Field
remembered.
almost got him in the end zone.
I think it was Fields' efforts.
It
that
was.
Actually got
It
him
really
going this week.
was.
So I'm kind of 0-1 as far as manifestations go so far this year. But if that's going to stop me from trying it again, you have been gravely mistaken.
That's
I'm going to
right.
keep trying to make it happen with not just Kyle Pitts, but really a lot of other things that I need to go right this week here in fantasy. So number 3, can I go on this
Yeah,
one? I'm going to
please,
go,
this
and
one.
you guys may disagree here, but hear me out. I'm going to go with the Chargers next. And let me sort of break them down one by one. There are 3 players that we're discussing: Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, and Austin Eckler.
Okay.
Let's start with Mike Williams. I'm not worried because I told you all off season that when you draft Mike Williams, you have an opportunity to get a player that might get you 2 points one week and he might get you 22 the next week. And we're 3 weeks in. He's been bad, good, bad. So he's going to have a good week soon enough, right? Like that's kind of how it goes with Mike Williams.
Yep.
Keenan Allen got hurt, right? Like,
And he's coming back.
He's going to practice this week. We think he'll play. And when he does play, he's still Keenan Allen. And here's the reason why Austin Eckler is not higher on this list. So no running backs are good this year, right? So you're sitting here saying to yourself, like, Austin Eckler's on pace for fewer than 500 rushing yards. That's true. He saw more passing usage last week and the week before that. That's also true, but not to the level of last year. He's not scoring the touchdowns he was last year. Okay, well, here's the other news. Alvin Kamara, Dalvin Cook, Derrick Henry until last week, Jonathan Taylor over the past 2 weeks, Christian McCaffrey hasn't exploded. Like, Austin Eckler is still right now a clear-cut top 10 running back week in and week out. So while it hasn't been perfect, it's sort of camouflaged amongst the other running back that have not been good either this year.
I'm a little more worried about the Chargers. And the reason being that Justin Herbert's not Justin Herbert, and he's not going to be for a while.
Yeah, that part was disconcerting.
And you could see that he's uncomfortable. So if everybody thinks that the pain-killing injection, which he did get under ultrasound guidance, if you think that takes away all the pain, wrong. Because you could clearly see it. On top of that, he's lost his left tackle. And that's a big loss. Rashawn Slater done for the year. I just think there's going to be more of a breakdown. He's going to get more harassed. He gets more harassed.
Oh, God,
he's
that's
not
scary.
a great pass. That's the part that worries me. I agree with you that these receivers, they're too good to think that they're just going to fail. But I'm just more worried about the collective Chargers. I'm not disagreeing with your placement on this because I think it tips one way or the other, and we're going to hope for the best and that they'll figure it out. But that's why they're here as such a big concern.
Who's number 4 for you then, Stephania? Who's next?
On the list up, I mean, moving up from the Chargers.
Yeah, so player that you're
I'm
more
confused
panicked
by the numbers.
Yeah, I know. Princeton didn't teach you that one. It's okay.
I know. Not very good. DK Metcalf.
Okay.
I know you loved some DK Metcalf in the preseason, but it just hasn't.
Well, no, what I love the player, but
Right.
my take was that, again, you're signing up for this, right? You're signing up for a player that's still DK Metcalf. But he plays with Geno Smith now.
I know. I think I was never bold enough to take the bait because I felt like the player can't outplay the situation he's in.
Yep.
Yeah.
You look at Geno Smith, only hit that 200-yard mark this last week in week 3. He didn't even throw for 200 yards the first 2 weeks, and I think that's going to be a part of it if he doesn't have that volume.
It was better in week 3, no doubt, right? So you have to decide through 3 weeks, is week 3 more emblematic of what you expect this offense to be on average, or is it weeks 1 and 2? Now, let me just point out 2 important factors here. The Seahawks are actually throwing the football a lot.
Yeah.
They traded away Russell Wilson and then started throwing the football a whole bunch more. We can get into that in a different conversation, but they are throwing the football more than they have in the past couple of seasons, and it was a better sign. Maybe that week 3 performance builds confidence in Geno Smith, but again, to Daniel's point, back-to-back games out of the gates for DK Metcalf with 40 yards or fewer in weeks 1 and weeks 2. He has a breakout in week 3. He has Mike Williams-like value to me, just with a worse quarterback.
I just don't think he's throwing down the field. DK Metcalf was made for the go route, right?
Yeah, he is the go route.
And it's like now he's got a quarterback who's just not throwing distance and
gets the Detroit Lions this week, so we'll see how that works out.
Well, that could be an
Jeff
improvement.
Okudah has actually been pretty good the last
Yeah,
couple of
that's
weeks.
true.
We'll
Really
see how
happy for
that
him.
works out.
Yeah.
All right, this last one for me, the most panicked on this list for me.
Okay.
I'm going to say this. It's Russell Wilson.
Yeah.
Nice call.
Russell Wilson
I'm
has
with
been
you.
really tough because when we thought, what is
Killing
Russell
me.
Wilson going to look like with this new Broncos offense? Nobody expected this. Nobody expected what we're seeing right now, which is quarterback 23 on a per-game basis, Field Yates.
Can I tell you something, too? Is I always say that part of fantasy football is the emotional side of it. And I don't know if you want to call Russell Wilson brazen this offseason, how you want to describe him, but he took plenty of shots on the way out the door at Seattle, right? Almost like I've been freed. I'm finally going to a place that knows how to utilize me. And everybody's talking about Nathaniel Hackett, this genius, he's going to be so well coached in Denver, and they've got all these pieces around him, and they're just going to be a well-oiled machine out of the gates. I don't have the time or the knowledge to go through and rank all 32 offensive operations right now. But I can't imagine the Broncos are in the top half in terms of just like general impressiveness, right?
Yeah.
It's bad. We know he has one really good receiver in Cortland Sutton. Another is hurt in Tim Patrick. And as we discussed in a recent show, I think the jury is still out here on Jerry Jeudy as a player, right? He's got a ton of talent. There's no two ways about that, right? I do believe that. But
And banged up.
he's banged up, yes.
Yep.
But he's got to be more consistent as a player. He just has to be.
I feel like that this is an offense that it takes time for them to not only learn the system, but to develop together.
Yeah.
None of these guys played together in the
Yeah.
preseason, right? So there's none of that work. And you just wonder, is it going to be halfway through the season when it finally starts to gel? And you're like, oh, there's the Denver team. But
Yeah.
meanwhile, in fantasy, like
Halfway
too
through the
late for
season.
me.
Yeah.
Say,
Right?
no, again, the problem is that like we've seen how many quarterbacks have we seen change teams in recent years? Matthew Stafford, Tom Brady, and right away it's like, and those guys, by the way, Brady changed teams during the COVID offseason.
Yeah.
And I know that Tom Brady's better than Russell Wilson for his career. But like we've seen quarterbacks quickly assimilate into a new offense and take those players and elevate them. And so for Russ to have 3 straight weeks of being substandard is a problem. And to Stephania's point that like, it might be nice for the Broncos if by midseason Russ is cooking and they're, 6-3 or something. But for fantasy, you might be 2-7 because Russ is your quarterback by that point.
Yeah, it's going to be tough from that standpoint. I am nervous about Russell Wilson.
Yeah, we all are. We're
all
panicked.
right. We're going to be back with our friend Liz Loza in just 1 second. But first, we're going to pay some bills. Field football season is here, and nothing beats seeing your favorite team live. Not only does Vivid Seats have great NFL ticket prices, they're also the official ticketing partner of ESPN. And with Vivid Seats rewards, when you buy 10 tickets, you get the 11th free. Download the app or visit vividseats.com today. Vivid Seats, life happens live. Receive a reward credit equal to the average price of 10 tickets purchased, excluding taxes, fees, and processing costs. See vividseats.com/rewards for terms and conditions.
Football season brings back many traditions we know and love. Touchdown dances, the thick 6, game-winning field goals, comebacks in your fantasy league that you didn't think were possible. And watching it all with friends in a cooler full of Miller Lite, that's the best. Every Sunday, game time is Miller time. Or Monday or Thursday. Is it never not Miller time? No. The answer is no. With only 96 calories and 3.2 carbs for a 12-ounce serving, your only concern is keeping your RB1 on the field or getting your tight end into the end zone. Please, Kyle Pitts. And Miller Lite tastes like beer because if you're a beer lover, you don't want that watered-down flavor. You want the original light beer. No matter how your team plays, it's the beer that's always a winner. And what more could you ask for? Football season brings back the big hits, so reach for the biggest hit of them all, Miller Lite. You can find Miller Lite pretty much everywhere beer is sold or go to MillerLite.com/FFF for delivery options near you. It's Miller time. Celebrate responsibly. Miller Brewing Company, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. 96 calories and 3.2 carbs for 12 ounces.
All right, we're back to talk about Underappreciated with Liz Loza. Liz, it's so good to see you here on this Wednesday. How you doing?
I am well, friend. Good to see you too.
Yes, it's going to be fantastic. We're talking about the underappreciated players in fantasy, some that I myself do not appreciate after I have looked at your list. So I'm excited to have this conversation with you. And let's start it right off at the top with Josh Jacobs at the running back position. Why do you like Josh Jacobs this week?
Well, I think sometimes in fantasy we become so enamored with the ceiling that we forget to appreciate a solid floor. Like, security is not a bad thing. Consistency is not a bad thing. It doesn't make you boring or washed. This isn't The Notebook. This is fantasy football, and Javonte Williams isn't going to row you around a pond in your final days, but Josh Jacobs might sneaky give you some consistency at a position that, as you've talked about throughout the show, has otherwise stunk. Do you know, friend, that Josh Jacobs, since entering the league, has been at minimum a top 15 fantasy producer? He was the top 8 overall fantasy back in 2020, and he's become more efficient this season. He has recorded a catch and a run over 12 yards in every game so far this season. That was something that he did only one time last year and was still the running back 14 overall. He's got at least 18 touches in 2 straight games. He's gone over 70 yards every week to start the season. And he's playing the Denver Broncos, who we talked about both on Sunday and last week on this show in terms of their run defense maybe not being as efficient as people expected. They have moved up from 32 a little bit in my Loza blocking metric, but they're still a bottom 8 unit. And I think that Josh Jacobs deserves to be inside the top 20 in week 4.
Wow, inside the top 20. I heard probably about 50% of that because the other 50% I was just dreaming about Javonte Williams in my retirement, just rowing me around a little pond. Just for the record, it was a great visualization. But Josh Jacobs this week against the Broncos, we've talked about it. Like you said, a matchup that you like. I have him at running back 27, so still a guy that I have as a flex play a little lower than you. But I'll tell you what, if I'm wrong here, Liz, maybe I need to start readjusting my evaluations on Josh Jacobs. We'll see how that works. Amari Cooper, another guy that you like, taking on the Atlanta Falcons. Talk to me why you like this Browns pass catcher here.
Amari Cooper is the wide receiver 12 in fantasy overall. He's been a top 10 producer for 2 consecutive weeks. He has more fantasy points than, wait for it, CeeDee Lamb, that's some irony, Jamar Chase, and Cortland Sutton. Admittedly, his ADOT is down 13% from last year, but we might have expected that given the quarterback change, right? In exchange, however, his target share has gone way up from 22% in 2021 to 36% so far this year. I think he's going to flirt with double-digit targets again against Atlanta. The Falcons actually rank 30th against balls thrown under 20 yards, which again is not particularly sexy, but Amari Cooper is averaging 8.1 yards per target. That's a great matchup, even if it's not highlight reel worthy.
Yeah, you're not wrong. It's tough for me when I was looking at this, trying to figure out this Browns passing game and being able to trust Jacoby Brissett feels so difficult because I don't love the quarterback position. But to your point, I think I'm a little too low on Amari Cooper. Back-to-back top 10 finishes, and it's not about the quarterback necessarily. It's about the way that the quarterback will utilize that wide receiver one in the offense. I think this is a good call here. I think I need to move Amari Cooper up in my rankings a little bit. Let's talk one more guy here. Evan Engram taking on the Philadelphia Eagles. Yeah. I thought when people take on the Philadelphia Eagles from a pass game perspective, you never play them. But here we are, and you want to talk about Evan Engram.
Well, I mean, let's talk about tight ends, right? Like, that's a frustrating position. Stephania just talked about Dalton Schultz coming back from the knee injury and how there might be a little bit of rust. This is not a position that is ever particularly consistent, except Evan Engram is the tight end 14 overall. He's running an average of 27 routes per game, which is tight end 12, and he has a total of 94 on the season. That's inside the top 5. Also, no drops yet, which I know a lot of former Evan Engram truthers might be triggered by, but it can be explained by his ADOT of, again, not sexy, not highlight reel worthy, much more under the radar, worthy of being maybe unappreciated. His ADOT right now, 4.7, but that gives him stability in an otherwise really shaky position, particularly in PPR-friendly formats, which is the ESPN standard 1-point PPR. Yep. So after what Philly's defensive front did to Carson Wentz, I think that Trevor Lawrence is going to need a safety valve. And by the way, the last time Evan Engram faced the Eagles, admittedly as a Giant, it was week 16 of last season. He found the end zone and posted top 10 fantasy numbers.
Hey, that's not too bad. I mean, let's go back to the well with that one, Evan Engram. I think we would all take those numbers here in week 4. All right. Quarterbacks that have you confused is the next set of lists that we want to go through, Liz. And in looking at this, I'm confused by all these same quarterbacks, so I'm really excited to do this. Let's start with Kyler Murray. We've been waiting to see what Kyler Murray is going to be this year, and I think I'm just as confused as you, although I want you to set the table and then I'll react to it. Why are you confused about Kyler Murray?
Well, let me ask you a question, Daniel. When you think of Kyler Murray outside of the rushing, from a passing perspective only, what's the first phrase that comes to your mind?
Greg Dortch. Is that wrong?
How about the Hail Murray?
The Hail Murray. Okay, sorry.
That is what we think of with Kyler Murray, but he has really struggled with the deep ball this season, and it has to be more than just DeAndre Hopkins' absence, right? Like, he is ranked second in total pass attempts with 141 on the season, but he's managing a YPA of 5.6. Gross! That's QB 32, and his deep ball completion percentage is barely over 33%. His red zone accuracy rating is outside of the top 20. That is also worrisome given this matchup against Carolina. The Panthers, say what you will, have only allowed 3 passing scores so far on the season, and Carolina's actually 2-point favorites. Maybe that works for Murray in terms of fantasy scoring and game script. And obviously the rushing gives him this upside, so he's still like inside my top 8. But I'm worried that we haven't seen the vintage top 5 worthy version of Murray.
I am totally with you. I thought Rondale Moore. I thought Rondale Moore would be playing so far this year. Unfortunately, he's been out, and that's why Greg Dortch has been stepping in. However, when you're talking about him throwing it deep, I thought Hollywood Brown coming over to this team as a deep threat is something that he would look at. And it has been the exact opposite. This last game in week 3, it was like run 8 yards down the field, run 10 yards down the field, and here's a quick out to Marquise Brown, and that's it. Like they're not taking deep shots from that perspective. So really difficult and tough to be able to figure out. I'm with you there. Still a starter for us this week, but somebody that I feel like there's so much more left to Kyler Murray that we have yet to see on our fantasy, on the fantasy field, I guess you can say. All right, let's talk about Derek Carr taking on the Denver Broncos.
Right. So I think when the Davante Adams trade happened, we all assumed that Derek Carr was now going to be pushed inside the top 12, right? He had some great efficiency metrics last season. But he's been fine. He was a QB 22 to open the season, and he's been the QB 9 in 2 consecutive weeks. He's actually recorded 2 touchdowns in every game this season, which is up considerably from last year. He only did that twice, I think, over the last 10 games of 2021. But it still doesn't feel good to start him. Like, I'm still not excited because, again, when you think about the TMTM brand attached to these players, like, you think about accuracy with Derek Carr. For, like, throw away the, like, check down king narrative. But even if a quarterback is airing it out, which could mess with their accuracy a little bit, it shouldn't when you've got Davante Adams, Darren Waller, Hunter Renfrow, and newly anointed vertical threat Mac Hollins. Like, you'd imagine an accuracy rating inside the top 10, let alone the top 20, or a true completion percentage better than 63. That's the QB 29. I mean, I'm less than thrilled to have any of that facing the Denver pass defense, which is considerably better than their run defense.
Yeah, it is. And I think that's my hesitation for this week, why I have him at quarterback 15 because of that Denver run defense. Yep. And the fact that we have not seen him. If I had watched him and Davante Adams just click all 3 weeks, like this is what they've just been doing, I probably feel differently about Derek Carr. But through the first 3 weeks of the season, taking on a tough defense here in week 4, still some hesitation for both of us. All right, last one here. I feel like you're trying to hurt my feelings with this one, but no big deal. Let's talk about Geno Smith taking on the Detroit Lions.
I mean, you mentioned it a little bit earlier, right? Like, he did pass for over 300 yards last week. He was the QB 6 overall, and he currently, not for nothing, has more total fantasy points than Russell Wilson, who is limited, in fact, not unlimited, Mr. incredibly limited. Matthew Stafford he is limited. So Smith has more fantasy points than Russell Wilson, Matt Stafford, Aaron Rodgers, or Tom Brady. He lit it up against Atlanta. He's got the Lions this week. I do think, we talked about Jeffrey Okudah really emerging on the Monday morning pod, and 7 sacks is not nothing. I think the Lions defense is better than people are giving them credit for, but they have allowed the 8th most passing yards and the 2nd most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. They've also only recorded 1 interception. And so I think that that's a pretty illuminating stat. I do think that Smith is going to be viable as a QB2 for super flexers. Before, we weren't really even ranking him, right? Like, he's in that QB 20-ish range. I would prefer streamers, though, like Marcus Mariota or Jared Goff, if that's an option this week.
I am with you there. When you look at Geno Smith's projection for this week, it's higher than I feel comfortable sliding him in at that spot, because his projection is like the 9th or 10th highest projection because of that matchup that you talked about, Detroit Lions, the way that they looked last week against the Falcons. There's some opportunity there, but it is sketchy. If you decide you want to start Geno Smith this week, good for you. I hope the good things happen. All right, let's close the show out, Liz, with some social questions, if that's all right with you. This question comes from D-Bot. Wants to know, would you take Gabe Davis for Jeff Wilson Jr. in a trade? Would you trade away Jeff Wilson Jr. for Gabe Davis?
I mean, I just talked about appreciating a floor, and you throw a Gabe Davis question at me. But yes, I do think, assuming that you have running backs that are probably equivalent of Alvin Kamara or Austin Eckler, like Field talked about earlier, how they're all kind of disappointing, and you have an opportunity to receive Gabe Davis, I would take that trade, yes.
All right, this one comes from Jimenez. Wants to know, I just traded away Tyreek Hill, worried about Tua long-term, for Derrick Henry.
Okay.
Was that a good move or a bad move?
I mean, not knowing the rest of your roster, I'm going to hope that you have some T. Higgins, Christian Kirk, Amon Ra, maybe that kind of goodness on your roster, in which case adding Henry, who I am feeling optimistic about given his work in the passing game last week. Like, yeah, I'll ship that trade, sure.
I'm all right with that. I would like to know what the rest of your wide receivers look like, to your point. I'm less worried about Tua's health long-term. Stephania doesn't have any worries about it, so I'm not worried about it. Carlos Diaz wants to know rest of the season: Trevor Lawrence or Kirk Cousins? Liz Loza.
So this is like the ultimate underappreciated, hopeful for kind of combination. You know, yesterday I was looking at this because I have them back to back in my rankings for this week. And if you take away like the brand names and just look at the stats, they are really evenly matched in a ton of categories. I do think I am going to give the tiniest of edges to Kirk because he has a better offensive line right now. Injuries happen, obviously. And I have to imagine that Justin Jefferson turns those Jets back on.
Ooh, I would like to, I mean, listen, might be tough sledding again here in week 4, getting the Marshawn Lattimore shadow. I know Mike Clay is going to write about it in the wide receiver cornerback article, so check that out later this week on E+. But hang tight. Hang tight on Justin Jefferson. Don't worry about it. He's going to be okay long term. Last one. Let's do 2 more. Vital Signs wants to know, would you trade Jamal Williams for Drake London?
Yes. I will trade the backup running back in Detroit for Drake London, who is looking like an absolutely bona fide ascendant talent who crushes in the red area like he did at USC, regardless of quarterback play.
Now, I agree with you, although I don't appreciate your tone with the way you say backup running back. But I do agree with you on Drake London, all right? Just so we're on the same page. All right, last one comes from Cesar Contreras, wants to know, Pickens, Zay Jones, or Kadarius Toney, which one would you pick up off of the waiver wire? For me, it's Zay Jones. Liz, is there someone, Pickens, Zay Jones, or Kadarius Toney?
You want the guy who's going now, right? Like, you know that like Marvin Jones is looking a little bit dusty, right? Zay Jones is clearly taking on that number 2 role. Trevor Lawrence and Doug Peterson have like done themselves. What a 180, by the way. Like, bravo, Jacksonville.
Seriously.
To have this congeal. And we just talked about Nathaniel Hackett and like how he needs to play with Denver more. But like Doug Peterson walked in and he was like, nope, I got you. So anyway, yes, I'm going to take Zay Jones because he's currently producing. Kadarius Toney has a ton of talent and a ton of drama, and I don't need that in my life. And George Pickens is exciting, but his quarterback thus far is not.
Yeah, I am out on Kadarius Toney with all the things that are going on there. I feel like the volatility is really tough to be able to figure out from a week in and week out basis. And as much as, to your point, Zay Jones and these Jaguars, Trevor Lawrence, Christian Kirk, James Robinson has looked fantastic as the RB1 in this offense. Everything about these Jaguars from last year to this year is an improvement. Shout out to Jaguars fans. Like, I'm stoked for you guys because you deserve this. All right, that's going to do it for us today, Liz. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. It's always fun to be able to have you here on a Wednesday. We will be back tomorrow, me, Field, and Mike Clay, talking about Thursday Night Football, wide receiver cornerback matchups. Only one more sleep until football. We love you guys. We'll see you tomorrow.